That job.
Yeah. How convenient it is for him to go there. In the end, the neighborhood will become impoverished because those 250 jobs will not add much to the economy and to the wealth of the community. Very little. The very economic structure of the surrounding neighborhood will be distorted. As the bodegas, the small businesses, other things go out of business or struggle to stay alive. So in a sense, you would have, if someone put a cathedral in the midst of a desert, you would have put this pearl in the midst of this pen. Because the neighborhood itself would not have been enriched by it, even though it may look so on the surface. In a sense, it would have been more effectively impoverished by it, because now its wealth is being sucked out more efficiently. And where did List get this idea from? They looked at the Fulton Mall in Brooklyn, a mall supported by black folk, a mall that handles 100,000 people a day, a mall where black people spend over $1 million a day, a mall where the 200 stores earn an average of $200 per square foot. You don't know what kind of wealth you got here. No. These malls, this mall in Brooklyn, this Fulton Mall, where black people spend money, and is like the 6th largest retail turnover area in the country. You see, you may be poor, but there are many of you. And it's this concentration of poor people that makes them, in totality, outweigh the wealth and spending of suburbs which are scarcely populated. Understand? And therefore, the amount that's earned per square foot in the Fulton Mall compares very favorably with the amount that's earned in any suburban mall. In fact, the average earned per square foot in the Fulton Mall is $200. The average earned per square, and the average earned by the suburban mall is $234. See what kind of wealth you got here? And these white boys are familiar with this, but we don't study ourselves, and we don't know ourselves. We don't know our own strength. Many of the pathmarks in Newark, in the so-called new community in Newark, in Restoration Plaza, and so forth, out-earn suburban pathmarks and pathmarks outside of the city. Yes, that's why do you think pathmarks wants to get in here? Why do you think Safeway wants to get into the inner city? Why do you think the others? These big companies are not going to move into areas where they think they can't earn money. They're not about charity. These are profit-making organizations. So if Pathmark is going to move down here, it's because Pathmark thinks that this is going to do what? Pay off. And it's going to pay big enough for it to do what? To be there. And List then studied the fact the Fulton Mall and other malls are wealth producing. They also studied the fact that the mall markets on the outside have been saturated. And now, to a good extent, the only one left is the one right here in the inner cities. Now, what do we have here now? You think I'm joking about this business of this nonprofit agency? I happened to run across a letter, a statement run in the New York Times on October 2, 1994, written by the president of the Local Initiative Support Corporation. And I found it interesting. It was titled, Inner Cities Beckon Savvy Retailers. Last month, a group of corporate investors unveiled an unprecedented fund to reestablish major supermarkets in more than a dozen poor urban areas. This is Paul Grogan, president of this nonprofit organization. And he states very clearly, but no one should confuse this effort, the retail initiative, which is an arm of that group, with philanthropy. Okay. These are his words. Did you hear what he said? That's right. But no one should confuse this effort, the retail initiative, with philanthropy. Wow. We're not in the charity game. This is not why the likes of Bank America, Bankers Trust, and GE Capital have signed on. The fund, as much as 90 million when leveraged, is a hard-headed investment tool for breaking into a surprisingly lucrative market, the inner city. Okay? To be played upon, what did I say? Your consciousness has to be what? Backwards. A rich people have to see themselves as what? Poor. We got so we identify ourselves as what? Poor. We associate poorness and blackness as one and the same thing. And yet every other group is out there raping and robbing us of our wealth. And we still see ourselves as what? Poor. European nations and other nations have grown rich on the poor nations of Africa, the poor nations of the Caribbean. They fought battles and wars, ones and twos and other kind of wars, in order to gain control of poor nations, in order that they grow up wealthy. And we have this ideological belief and self-concepts that have us look at ourselves as poor people. And yet others are picking our pockets at every turn. And he goes on to say, you read it right. Yeah. Guys up front, please don't Negroes don't read the Sunday Times. Look up words. First, any pioneering supermarket would encounter little competition in these areas. They ain't gonna block you out. They have no concept or ideology that will permit them to block you from coming in. These are easy pickings here, baby. Years ago, see, they don't say that about the Japanese, do they? Let us in, bang, 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 let us in. Had old Bush throwing up on the table. Old Clinton went over there. They still couldn't win. The Chinese backed them down because the Chinese just don't throw their legs over to anybody that comes along. No. They talk to the Chinese, but they have to negotiate with the Chinese. Because the Chinese just don't let the countries fly open to anybody in Africa. No, they don't do it. And they make demands for doing business there. And that's what it's about. And they are willing to even pay higher prices to protect their national interests. They don't let convenience, because the American side say, well, you let us in, the products will be cheaper, and your consumers would get things much cheaper. Japanese said, that's not our culture. We just don't operate on bargains. We just don't operate on what? Convenience. We just don't turn the wealth of our nation and our internal market over simply because you can say that you offer us a bargain and you can make it convenient. That may be the way you operate as Americans, but that's not the way we operate as Japanese. We hold other things dearer to ourselves than you do. And they block them out. And the Chinese and the Japanese trade balance relative to the United States is outstanding. Yes. And the United States is trying to find some way that that balance can be reduced in its favor. And it says, though, years ago, when the neighborhoods lost blocks and blocks of housing, supermarkets boarded up their windows and moved out. Since then, nonprofit community-based developers have rebuilt many of these areas. But the often activist resident, and it goes on here, I can't read the whole thing, and he goes on to state, this gentleman here, also, despite the inner city's lower incomes, their high population density gives them potent buying power. As the few supermarkets that do operate in such neighborhoods prove. A Pathmark supermarket in Newark, for example, routinely outperforms many other Pathmark stores. Also ranking high in industry profitability are a Safeway in Washington, a Winn-Dixie in Miami, and a Dominick's in Chicago. And it goes on, what is the bottom line? That there are markets for the asking, for urban retailing pioneers. Not only supermarkets, but banks, pharmacies, fast food restaurants, even health maintenance organizations. Do you think what's going on out here on this street is merely a struggle between people in stores and people out of stores? No. This is a major struggle for the control of wealth and property. And you got a lot of politicians who are silent on this vendor's business as part of this game. You got a lot of preachers who are silent on this business situation that are part of this game. You got a lot of these old front people, these old petty bourgeois Negroes that you find in every African nation who operate between big white capital and their own people to sell those people out for a few pennies. Yes, this is the same kind of game. Some of them even call themselves African heads of government. Yes, and others call themselves Negro elected politicians. Others call themselves real estate brokers. Yeah, who rent white folks' property for their absentee owners. And who think that by running black people out of business and discouraging them from going into business, they can bring in the big chain and other big whiteys so that they can pay fat rents, so that they can earn big commissions, while the people around these places suffer for lack of jobs and a lack of means of earning a living. This is the kind of game we have. We got a whole big game, the likes of Mobutu, who sells a whole nation of people so that he can get in a Concorde jet and take his to France.
That's right.
On 14 French chateaus. He rents a Concorde jet for $250,000 each ride. And gives away the wealth of that nation for his own personal and stupid means. And will ultimately destroy those people if he's not thrown out or destroyed in that office himself. And now we got a bunch of Negro politicians and preachers and people who want to do the very same thing within this nation, to sell the black nation out in America, to be front men for outsiders and alien corporate interests and elite, and try to sell the people on some kind of joke that they're advancing their economic interests by handing out a few cheap jobs and by creating some little convenience store within their midst. This won't happen, and it should not be allowed to happen. I was very fascinated to find, speaking of how this game is played, to read another piece in October 26th about a mall comes to a black township. How many read that piece? I tell you, you see, I know you don't want to read the Times. You don't want to read the Wall Street Journal. You don't want to read The Economist, Foreign Affairs. Yeah, but I'm telling you, if you want to know what the game is, if you want to know how the plan is being set up, yes, this is where the people write it out. They don't hide it from me. They put it right there. We're going to do this. This is the way we want to see the world organized. This is the way we're going to manipulate the world. This is how we're going to set it up, and so forth and so on. It will be projected sometimes 10 and 15 years before that. And you have time to change it. But again, if your consciousness does not include a knowledge of the situation, does not have that kind of information in it, then you will be unable to deal with it, and you will be overrun by the future, and you will suffer from future shock. Because the white man's game is the same the world over. The same technique. And that technique involves the use of Negro minds and the use of a falsified black consciousness as a vehicle for creating wealth and power. A mall comes to a black township. Where are they talking about? South Africa. Soweto, South Africa. It's not on 125th Street, ladies and gentlemen. It's all over the world. The article begins, Soweto, South Africa, October 23. Isn't it amazing they all happened about the same time? Yeah, the game is going on simultaneously. Because you see, these people have saturated their own markets. They built, pretty much, malls and things where they got to be built in their nation. Now, they've got to look for other places. And now they're looking at places they have overlooked. You see? And now they're going to come. That's why they're talking about diversity. That's why they're talking about educating a staff in diversity and multiculturalism. But a tearful-eyed Negro thinks they're talking about love between humankind. These people are not talking about love when they talk about multiculturalism. They realize that they can only exist in a world that's multicultural by being able to understand it and use its cultures as a basis for dominating them economically, socially, and politically. It wants to get to know you. It wants to ingratiate itself with you as a means of getting to your pocketbook, not because it has any deep and abiding respect for you as an individual or as a people. But love-starved Negroes, they respond to any hint of kindness on the part of those who abuse them. Yeah. Last year, a group of white executives from San Lan, yeah, they want white folks love more than they want, anything else. A group of white executives from San Lan Properties, a leading South African development company, piled into a minivan and rode into terra incognita. What is that? Yes, that's Latin for what? Unknown earth, unknown territory. The sprawling black metropolis of Soweto. A. Jacobus, a Swainpool, Sandland's regional manager recounts that journey. It is tempting to imagine a carload of cartoon capitalists with dollar signs ringing in their eyes. Ka-chung, ka-chung. Soweto, impoverished, alien, oppressed. Did I say power? Soweto.
Rhodesia.
Yes, name it. Anywhere black folk are. Impoverished, alien, oppressed, battle-torn Soweto suddenly seemed a land of untapped opportunity.
Another one?
Okay. All right. The first result of the trip materialized here on September 29th. The biggest and most modern shopping center any township has ever seen, complete with a family steakhouse, a triplex cinema, automatic telemachine, an appliance store, clothiers, and the nu plus ultra of suburban life in South Africa, a gun shop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man, after you get through buying all that stuff and you can't buy it, you can shoot yourself. At the mall's heart is a vast air-conditioned ShopRite supermarket that has brought some Soweto shoppers close to joyous tears. I mean, this guy puts it right in your face. Right here. Right here. And the thing goes on, I can't read you all of it here. Soweto, which once appeared to white business as a ghetto teeming with squatters and bristling with political upheaval, yes, all at once acquired a more alluring identity. A city of more than 3 million consumers without a grocery store, appliance dealer, a clothing outlet of national stature. Poor, oppressed people, but people who are gold mines nonetheless. You see, the same game, going over and over again. But this is not the only thing they have in mind. They're going to now develop, what's it called over here? A hyper shopping mall.
Hyper?
Yeah, yes. Mr. Swainpool said that the company had 2 other township projects near announcement, including a mammoth hyper mall in another part of Soweto and another half dozen on the drawing board. What are we facing here, ladies and gentlemen? Have we been so convinced that we were so poor that we didn't study economics? Because someone convinced us that you couldn't earn money trading with black folk? You hear many of Negro joking. When I used to try to get investment for a shop I had right here from Negroes who had a little money. Right here on this street. Yeah, and presented to them the business plan and the profitability plan. They didn't look at the income statements and the cash flow statements and the other thing. The only thing they could say, well, you can't make money if you only sell to black folk. You know, that was their reason for not investing. The very idea that you're in a black community, that the largest percentage of your customers will be black people, was for them the reason why they should not invest in the business. And you've had many Negroes think along those lines. You got to sell to everybody. You got to sell to the white folks. You got to sell here. I'm not against selling to everybody. and some to white folk. But the idea that you cannot grow wealthy selling to black folk is an idea that was fixed in our minds, so that when we believed this, we lost any courage and desire to invest. While other people who didn't believe this did what? Came right in and made the money, and gained the power as a result of making the money. We were so convinced that we were poor, that we didn't study the arts of business, the arts of finance, the development of a financial system. We did not develop the means by which we could organize ourselves economically so that we could provide for ourselves and generate wealth based on our wealth. We studied economics when we studied and the art of finance so that we could work for white folks, so that we could work with them in exploiting African people and African wealth. This is what it's about. The same game. But at least, I have to give my white South African brothers some credit. They are raising hell. They say, wait a minute here. What is this game? As the piece goes on, but the new interest of white retailers has generated a bitter outcry from some black businessmen in the township. They complain that after decades of weathering the strains of the apartheid ghetto, black entrepreneurs were pulled aside by the economic power of white outsiders who have discovered gold in the black townships. At least they are saying something. Where are our people who are complaining about the exploitation of this community? There's a gentleman here that says, you see, and of course, they did the same thing this project is doing. They used some 40 local organizations to review their plan. States it right here. The company entered Soweto on political tiptoes. It assembled a committee of 40 local organizations to review its plan. It created a trust fund, you see, and it used the group to do what? Run political interference. And then it promised the Negroes a few jobs. And then it gave 2 of them a business out of 68 stores. But one black man down there, Mr. Lagodi, African, says, we feel that appointing a few black faces in ShopRite doesn't give you a passport to come in and exploit the emerging black market. Okay. See, some Negroes think it's all right as long as Woolworth hires some managers, black managers, black clerks. As long as they hire a few black faces on white power, we'll let them take everything we got. Mr. Gama pointed out that his black chain stores had remained in business, this is the black South African, without laying off workers, despite political violence that scared away customers and drove the company repeatedly to the brink of bankruptcy. He fumed at the thought of white companies now reaping the dividends of the struggle. And we're going to see this kind of game occurring. You devastate a community. You suck it dry on one hand. And then you turn yourself around after a period of time to come back and rape it again. And this is the same kind of game. These banks of America, this Bankers Trust, these chemical banks, and the other banks who are moving one branch out of this community after another, deserting the communities. Now, in a stroke of good conscience, are going to move back into the community and help themselves again to it. White businesses know the devastation of apartheid wouldn't leave them. That's what I say. White businesses know the devastation of apartheid wouldn't leave them any competition. It is a walkover for them. Isn't that what Grogan was saying? We can just walk right in and take right over. Because we have let American apartheid do what? Devastate the African nation in America and devastate African communities. Now, boys, come on back in, because our devastation means that there's no local people there to compete with you. This is the deal. They argued here, at least I can admire these men, because they're saying, all these years we've had no access to capital, no access to credit. We were not able to gain expertise in business management. We did not have relationships with suppliers to buy in bulk. We could not do business in white areas. These men argued that white entrepreneurs moving into the emerging market, and you hear that word a lot, which, you know, emerging markets. A black township should be obliged by political pressure, if not by law, to take local partners, as do many foreign companies that come to South Africa. They're saying what? If you're going to move in here, we at least want to be what? A part of the ownership and control of the resources. We just cannot permit you to come in. But are we having that kind of debate in the black community here? Are there black businessmen, black politicians, and others who are saying, you cannot enter this community after you have devastated it, after you have subjected us to apartheid, after you have excluded us from credit, after you've excluded us from developing the kinds of businesses and other skills that we need, and now we're going to let you come in simply because you've run out of space in your own community. You want to come back in now and soak us again, and we, in the name of multiculturalism and Christian love and charity, are going to permit you just to come right on in and take everything out? Yeah, but we got that kind of crew. This is one of the reasons why, and the black business person over there in the black community should not even be debating this question in South Africa. It should be a part of black South African policy. Yes, but why? Why are they debating this? And why are these people planning to move into this black South African community? For the same essential reason that they're moving into our community. Because Nelson Mandela and those who run these nations are people who operate on a false economic ideology, and more so than that, on a false religious ideology. They have the slave religion of their masters in their hearts. I don't care if it's Christian or Muslim. Any people who have the religion of their masters are going to be manipulated by it. That's right. Yes, they have a religious ideology. And you've got Nelson Mandela up there talking, let's forget the past. You know who loves Mandela? To death? Bob Grant. Yes. He loves Mandela day and night. And you know if Bob Grant loves Mandela, something's wrong. You know that. Why does he love Mandela? Because Mandela refused to redistribute that wealth. That's right. That's right. And he sat up there and told the South African people to forget the past that damaged them in so many ways, the past that it will take them generations to overcome. He tells them to act as if that past never occurred. Yeah, it's some kind of false religiosity. It was not his boldly role, and he did not have the authority to stand up there and leave the wealth that these people had stolen in the hands of these thieves. But some Negro Christians, both here and abroad, thought he did the right thing because they confused even their own Christian ideology. Because they confused forgiveness with justice. Yes. Yes. They think forgiveness and justice are the same thing. Mandela forgave those people, but he did not demand what? Justice. And often forgiveness can block justice being done. That's why you don't forgive too rapidly. No, sir. It is not only Christian to forgive, it is also Christian to be what? Just. Yes. He did not demand justice. I saw him mockingly say, suppose I see you walking down the block and I grab your pocketbook with your life savings in it. And as soon as you reach to get it back, I said, let's forget the past. Let's not think about it anymore. Let's be brothers and sisters. Let's form a multicultural nation.
Give me my pocketbook.
Yeah. Oh, no. You forget the past. You know, I took your pocketbook in the past. Isn't that a wonderful con game? Let's go down and grab the people's money. Forget the past. Forget the past. You know? And this is what he's done. In trying to be magnanimous, he is telling these people, even though these people have stolen your wealth, even though they have accumulated tremendous advantages, wealth, property, human resources, human capital, all kinds of comforts and everything else based on their past behavior. Forget that and let them do what? Keep it.
Do it again.
Let them keep it. Let them keep it. Yes. And now he's going to produce a raceless society, a meritocratic society, where people will be not judged in terms of their color or their creed. Okay? And now they can take this accumulated wealth, the wealth they use by killing and enslaving African people,
Yes.
the wealth they use by taking the property of African people and exploiting them mercilessly,
Yes.
they now are permitted to keep this wealth with a clean conscience.
What?
And now they are allowed to enter into the free market from which African people were restricted for hundreds of years and not permitted to participate. And in the name of multiculturalism in the new South Africa, they can take that wealth and come and own the land and property and steal the other wealth that African people have because some ideological joke got it wrong.
Got it wrong. Free and
Yes.
India now.
When you forgive without demanding justice, you reward injustice. So not only were the white South Africans so-called forgiven, they were paid and rewarded for their injustices.
Same as slavery.
You cannot believe these. How do you as so-called black Christians fall for this baloney? Because you see, the white folk teach you one theology while they teach themselves another. That's why they use the same religion and the same God to capture you and enslave you and say God permitted them to do it.
No.
You use the same one to lay down and grovel in the dirt and let them walk over you and claim that their walking over you is a sign of your religiousness. Yes. That's why we let these Arabs enslave us. Come and steal our people and enslave our people and sell our people. And then sell out that religion.
Yes.
And they too come right in, the Arabs, right into Africa and own the shops and own the businesses. And some Negro hollered, Allahu Akbar!
And they slice them
While
up.
he's not giving them a break. And uses the religion to justify letting another people who enslaved them own and control the economy.
That's right. Teach.
Because you've been taught the wrong religion in the wrong way. In Nelson Mandela's forgiveness, the victimization of African people is punished. These people are now being punished for being victims. In the African situation all across the world, no good deed shall go unpunished.
That's right. That's right.
And no good, no bad one shall go unrewarded. That seems to be the way the deal is set up.
That's what it looks like. That's it.
When you forgive before you demand justice, not only do you reward injustice, the injustice continues and it increases. And the inequality produced by injustice continues and increases. And therefore the accumulated wealth that whites have gathered as a result of their injustices will now be used to maintain the original inequalities that was characteristic of their original societies. So rich white folk, powerful white folk that were rich and powerful during apartheid will be rich and powerful white folk in the new South Africa.
That's right.
And if the inequality of power and wealth was a major source of problem and violence in the black community, it will continue to be a major source of poverty and violence. It's still going to go on. I got to close it. My brother asked me to close it here. But I just want to bring your attention to another little piece quickly here. November 4, 1994, Dangerous Young Lions. Nelson Mandela talking about these young men. In a speech last spring, President Nelson Mandela lamented the transformation of what his African National Congress called young lions. The youth in the township have over the decades have over the decades a visible enemy. That is, they had the government. Now that the enemy is no longer visible, that's what they think, because of the transformation that is taking place. Their enemy is, and this is Nelson, their enemy is now you and me. People who drive a car and have a house. In other words, there's a great increase in crime rate going on there, and where it's dangerous for you to even drive a car down the highway. I have caught people, just the young men, people just pull you right out of it, strip you down and drive away with it.
And carjacking?
And yes, carjacking and other kinds of so-called black-on-black violence.
They want justice.
So what did we say then? Because these people were forgiven, they were permitted to keep their wealth, and the inequality was permitted to continue, then the problems associated with inequality, violence, poverty, unemployment, and so forth, the problems associated with that will continue. So in this instance, forgiving these whites, forgetting the past, did not resolve a problem. It has done what? Created new problems. Just as removing these vendors from these streets is not going to resolve the problem of crime and violence in the black community. And family instability is going to do what? Increase them. And while you have your righteous Christian forgiveness and your multicultural non-colorism, you are at the same time generating problems of crime and criminality. I will tell you that your greatest problem will be not that of getting into world work unobstructed by vendors. You will be able to walk down the street without having your head knocked over by your own children, from whom you have robbed of their wealth and of their inheritance. Yes, you will think in no way running these vendors off the street, in no way not owning this street is going to contribute to peace and harmony. There is no peace without what? Justice. You hear it all the time. And the essence of justice is reparation.
Yes.
The essence of justice is redistribution.
Yes.
The essence of justice is to pay for damages done.
Yes.
And the white South African, as well as the white American, as well as whites all over this world, must reparate the injuries that they've done to the African people who deserve it. Their wealth must be redistributed if balance is to be brought about. And if they don't do it, and they're not going to do it, then we will have to do it for them.
Yeah, that's the way.
Yes. What are you going to get as a result of this forgiveness? Mandela and black politicians? A greater class stratification within the black community. Yes. You're going to create this idea now that we are all equal, that we shouldn't look at each other in terms of race, that we are in a free market, everybody has an equal chance to do this, and yet every time you see going into it, a white folk, Asian folk, other folk. So, but you're going to tell your children that race is not responsible for this. And yet, they're not going to see their race as being the ones in charge. This then raceless society, this colorless society, strangely enough, is going to increase the level of self-blame and self-hatred in the black community. Because when you tell people that that races are no longer operators, that they're no longer being restricted by another group, and yet they do not see themselves as succeeding and making it, and people like themselves as succeeding and making it, then they are going to turn around and do what? See themselves as deficient, blame themselves, and hate themselves, and say that it must be something about us, the reason why we can't make it, because there's no one out there holding us back. We are free now. Nothing depends on race. You see? So you're going to get this contradiction that at the very point where the world appears to be becoming raceless, you're going to get a race of people suffering ever more deeply and becoming ever more self-hating and becoming ever more violent in terms of these kind of contradictions you have today going on in this society. There are many of them occurring at this point.
That's right.
You tell people now they got a right, they can make it in the world, and so forth, and then you disinvest their schools. They can be anything they want to
Right.
be, and then you don't give them the means by which they can be what they want to be. That's why you tell them if they're not what they want to be, they like values. They like family background. You don't tell them they like a chem lab in the school. You don't tell them they like a computer lab. You don't tell them that their school is up to date and so forth and things like this. No, it's their absence of value. It's something about what? Them. Individually and ethnically. And now this is what the South Africans will be told. Now check out what's going on in the suburbs of South Africa. You know what's happening in the suburbs of South Africa? Same thing that happens over here. I'm saying this for these multicultural Negroes. Those ones who don't forgive and forget. Yeah. You know, I tell you, if you're going to be multicultural, be really multicultural. Demand that these other people live here then. Yeah. Demand that they be members of your church.
That's right.
Demand that they go to the same schools your children go to.
Check it out.
Demand that they contribute to the institutions that are necessary for socializing your children. Demand that they generate jobs and so forth for the people. Then you can buy it, but you don't demand that, yet you call yourself a multiculturalist. Your multiculturalism only amounts to the fact that you want to let them in here, take your money, and then go home. You just want to see a mix of merchants in the place, and you call that multiculturalism. If it is a truly multicultural neighborhood, they would live here and work here and play here and die here. And if they can't do that, then they don't deserve to get the wealth that's here. I got you, Brother X. I'm coming out of here. Just quick reading with these Negroes. The suburbs of South Africa stay cold to blacks. Thursday, November 3rd. Where's all this love and forgot the past business? After the cage of apartheid began to open up, why does a cage bird sing? And the borders of his existence were no longer the parked roads of Soweto. Vusi Makabela found a peach-colored house in a white promised land with rose bushes and a two-car garage. These people are ready to wax elegant when it comes to it was there that he knelt with his family in a corner of his bedroom to thank the ancestors for his family's good fortune. He sprinkled tobacco on the carpet, as the ancestors must have their snuff, and marked the sacred spot with his deceased father's walking stick. Outside, he planted a tiny sapling, which he named Watch Us Grow. The next day, a for sale sign went up at the house next door. The people on the other side left a few months later. He never caught their names. Soon, more and more middle-class Sowetans replaced the departing whites. Now, 2 years later, his suburban town of Naturena in the Red Rock Hills, 2 miles east of Soweto, has begun to feel like the Soweto without poverty. And it goes on to talk about this kind of situation. When are you going to give up these fantasies that you're going to laugh at white folks?
Did they move out? Didn't they move
And
out?
be the same as they? When are you going to give up these fantasies that other people are going to forget who they are ethnically and so forth, and deal with the real politics of the world? When are you going to give up these wrong-headed religious ideological beliefs and face the reality that justice is also a religious demand? That's why you got something called hell, isn't it? Right? Hell says that people pay for what? Their injustices in life. That they pay for what? Their sins. The essence of balance is there. That, hey, something has got to be paid for. You just can't get away with it and get away and just go right into heaven. And we're trying to let these whites get into heaven, even though they've committed dastardly sins and so forth. I will end this here then by saying, and all of this if what I've talked about tonight, and if the coming genocide of our people, and that is a great possibility, is the result of our ideological orientation, the way our mind and consciousness is constructed, then we need to change our mind and our consciousness. And we need to change our culture. Black American culture is not the appropriate culture for us. All right? Even though you may think it's great and you may think it's wonderful, the reason why I say that is because it's filled with too many reactionary elements and too much ego-defensive behavior. Singing the blues instead of taking care of business. Talk about how a cage bird sings instead of singing a war song and tearing up the cage and tearing up the person's Yes. We can't have a culture this way. A culture, like anything else, has got to be measured empirically. It doesn't matter even if it was present in Africa 500 years ago. To say something is African is no justification for keeping it. To say something is black is no justification for keeping it. It has to be measured or get some kind of standard. Again, you Christians know what that empirical measurement is, don't you? Your Jesus told you what? You shall know a fruit by what? You shall know a tree by what? The fruit it bears. Huh? That's an empirical measure. He just didn't say, have faith and forget about it. He said you can measure the value of something. You can measure the value of something by looking at the fruit it bears. And if it does not bear any fruit, what did he say? It is good for nothing but to be cut down and thrown into the flames. Isn't that what he told you? You don't read your own Bible. That's why you messed up. Yeah. And so he says then that you can measure the value of a religion. You can measure the value of a system by looking at the fruit it bears. And if it bears no fruit and can only bear bitter fruit, then you should throw it away. You should burn it down and throw it up and throw it away. That's what it's about. I like the story of Doubting Thomas.
Plagued by tokenism.
Jesus walked in there, supposedly. Everybody else dropped on their knees. Oh, God is right. Thomas said, hey, wait a minute here. He checked you out. Hold your hands. Let's see if there's some stain there. Let me look at your side. Let me see this. Huh? He just didn't go on what? Superficial belief. He said, Lord, I believe, but help thou my what? Unbelief. Here. What? Let me measure something here. I just can't go on it. You know, Jesus Christ was walking through the fields one Sabbath, eating corn. You remember that, you Christians, you see. And the old Orthodox Jews ran out and said, you can't do this. This is against the law. You should be hurt. And what did Christ tell them? The Sabbath is what? Made for whom? Man. Not man for the what? Sabbath. Religion is made for man. To serve man. Not man to serve religion. You must understand that. Other people use their religion to serve them. And black people serve the religion.
That's right.
That is why the white man can use the Christian religion to capture and enslave black people.
That's true.
And deceive them. And use them and control them. And black people so busy serving the Lord, they are used and controlled and abused. And the more they sing and shout, the deeper they sink into degradation. Yes. Because they are serving the religion instead of seeing the religion as being necessary to serve them. God created religion as a service to man, not the other way around. The Arabs use Islam to serve them. They used it to penetrate Africa, to enslave African people. They used it as a means of gaining a trade advantage in Africa, the trade advantage they still on today. And black people use Islam to submit to the control of Arabs. and you claim you are praying to the same God, and you're worshiping the same religion. You are not.
Yes.
Because it is not the name of God that matters. It's your relationship to your God that matters. Yes. Yes, we have these people who are acting in this term, and we see this kind of thing. And because you let somebody else put a false religion at the center of your consciousness and put a false religion at the center of your culture, you saw people define your culture in terms of a hand-me-down slave religion. And build yourself around it. And you wonder why then the more you pray to the Lord, the worse things get for you. And why then that the more churches you have in a block, the more crime and criminality exists. I can measure the amount of crime and criminality in the black community by counting the number of black churches within the block. The more black churches you see in the block, the more criminality and crime you see in the community. I'm telling you, the communities where there's few little crime, violence, and so forth, you have a church every 2 to 3 miles. But communities where people are drinking and drugging and addicted and carrying on, you got a church on every 2 or 3 shoulders. Yes. So that must tell you something here. That must tell you that the religion is not serving you, but you're serving the religion.
Yes.
You have to understand that. And this is the same kind of religious nonsense that motivates Mandela and motivates these preachers and motivates these politicians that have sold out this black community. When you let that kind of religion be at the center of your culture and be at the center of your consciousness, then that kind of religion is going to be the source of your distress instead of the source of your relief and the source of your protection. And I'm not talking about after you die. I'm talking about right while you're here on earth. Understand? And it's culture, it's consciousness that is the source of power. That's why you got to develop it and recognize what it is. Even your own African brothers from the continent who still have a good fragment left of their culture are able to come over here to America and make it. Right in your midst. Yes. Yes. Reading here out of the Washington Post, Chris Sidiweme, the 40-year-old founder of Bamboo Inn Restaurant at Georgia Avenue, talking about Washington, D.C., and Kennedy Street started in 1989 with an $8,000 loan from a local bank. Having managed a McDonald's while earning a business degree from American University, Sidiweme thought he could make it with the West African Bistro. But with no credit history of his own, he needed someone to co-sign a loan. A friend from Nigeria, from Sidiweme's hometown, was happy to comply. The restaurant was a hit, and Sidiweme branched into 2 grocery stores. A logical move, he says, because more Nigerians eat food at home than in restaurants. He owns 2 stores now and is moving into the wholesale business with annual revenues of about $1 million. Sidiweme paid over $200,000 in state and local taxes, he's getting ripped off, last year, and another $600,000 in employee salaries. He expects to become a U.S. citizen next year. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, what the guy ain't going in? Africans, you know, and he goes on here, he talks about them saying, once they get here, they're talking about Africans from the continent, they find in the black community not only the camouflage, but a market for their wares and skills. And like the peddlers of the 1800s, they went deep into the provinces to what many Americans would consider hostile territory. The ghettos of Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, and New Orleans. They sold African imports to African Americans, the greatest consumers of the world. Cloth from Ghana, carvings from Zaire, even gold from the Gold Coast. The peddlers' network spawned the first African stores, which spawned further immigration. Yes, they are following the footsteps of the Jewish peddler, Howard University professor Naing said. The critical mass of lumping immigrants is being joined quickly by university-educated elites who are setting themselves up as real estate agents, as wholesalers, shopkeepers, and accountants serving fellow immigrants. People who are connected by what? Culture. A group consciousness. People who have an African-centered consciousness, who now use that consciousness as the basis for developing a financial system and using that financial system to advance their economic development. You see here the coming together what we call ethnic resources. The ethnic resources that come from being a Nigerian, that comes from being from the hometown. Those are brought together with what we call class resources. Those Africans who've gone to the colleges and to the universities, who've learned the business and finance and accounting and other kinds of things, and they join together. Those Africans who picked up skills and other kinds of things so that they can serve their fellow men who are in the retail business. And using that base to go into what? The wholesale business. And using that case to get into imports as they import their materials from Mother Africa and so forth. The same kind of plan that I recommend in Blueprint for Black Power, that the first level for black economic development involves capturing the internal market, capturing 125th Street, capturing every black street across the city. But not only doing that, capturing Fifth Avenue downtown. Your people work down there. That's where they spend their money. Be down there to get it, man. There's no reason why we have to stay up down in Harlem. The whole of New York City should be seen as a market for black people, because black people are spread all over the city. And we can get to them, and we can get to white people. You can even go to business downtown, you know. Set up be a black one. It could be all black employees. And use the Negro's mind to get it. And a white man's mind. Since they think all the white folk can own this business downtown, it wouldn't matter to them if they had blacks in there. They think that they're still buying from a white man. So, you can get both the Negroes and the whites. And all the rest, oh, these are just the servants in here, They're selling. So there's no reason why we just can't make it up downtown, anytime, round town, up, down, all around town. By bringing these things together. But once we get these internal markets set up, we're not about little mums and pops and stores only. We're going to get this internal market, just as this gentleman did here with these stores. What's the next move after you get the internal market? To move into the what? The wholesale market. Because you want to service all of these retail openings that you have, all across this city, all across this nation. You want these wholesale businesses now to do that. Now once you get into the wholesale businesses, where are you going to go from there? Into manufacturing, because you're going to manufacture and distribute through your wholesalers, through your retailers, because you know you have a market. And where do you go then after you earn your money and your wealth from manufacturing, wholesaling, and retailing? You're going to use that wealth to buy equity into white corporations and multinational corporations and gain enough power and influence in those corporations so that you can sit on their boards and determine how the rule shall be made. So that if these corporations will rule the world, we will be a part of their rulership. They will not rule against us. They will rule for us. You understand where we're going? And after you buy equity in America's corporations and so forth, you're going to get engaged in the export trade. You're going to become world traders and international dealers. You're going to invest in Africa. You're going to invest in Asia. You're going to invest wherever you can, because you're going to supply these jobs for your children. You're going to stabilize these families. You are going to become a major economic factor and force in the world. Yeah. Today the world is being divided into 3 regions, and is being dominated by 3 regions. The regions of Western Europe, which is using Eastern Europe as its manufacturing base increasingly. A region now called the North American region, which plans to use Mexico, Central and South America as its low-wage manufacturing belt, as its high-productive low-wage manufacturing belt, and East Asia. These 3 giants will be the control of the world's economy. What do we have left out there? Africa and African people. No African trade bloc, no African economic bloc. An Africa that is going to be ripped apart and raped and exploited by these other 3 groups. While some Negro is talking about multiculturalism and diversity. The Asian boys are so strong until the white boys have predicted that they will be the preeminent economic power before the turn of the century. The United States and Europe will be secondary powers. What have I warned you of before? Are you going to get this white man's foot off your neck only to have the Asian foot put back on it? This is what is going on out here today. You must become part of a Pan-African economic, political, and economic system. This is the only route to our survival as a people the world over. And if we are to do that, we must transform this thing that we call our culture. We must reinvent it. We must radically change the way we relate one to the other. I don't have time to tell you about the one that they're developing over here on 116th Street. How many of you are familiar with the African brothers and sisters over there? Last summer they stated there was one African-owned business on Harlem's 116th Street. Mokhtar Ndoye's Horizon 96 Insurance Agency. Since 1993, Ndoye has been joined by nearly a dozen entrepreneurs, 4 hair-braiding boutiques, 2 restaurants, 2 groceries, a halal butcher, a travel agency, and an African craft shop. New York, Ndoye smiles, is the promised land for Senegalese.
Yeah.
Okay? And they go on and going to talk about how this thing is going. How do they do it? They do it by the methods I talked to you about in the falsification of African consciousness, the method of what? The tontines, the method of the susu, where they combine their money together in a pot and they use that combined money. What is it they do? They use their savings as the basis for financing their growth. African American people, you don't need the pathmarks to come in here. You don't need the white-owned businesses to come in here. You can use the same method any other people use it, because the basis of the method is the pooling of wealth. It's what we call the syndication of money, where a large enough people, even with little money, if they combine that money in the correct way, can finance major economic projects. Where large numbers of people, even with small amounts of wealth, can finance major economic projects by investing in those projects. In the book, Blueprint of Black Power, I show how just by contributing a few dollars a month, we can build an underwriting agency, a national underwriting agency worth $6 billion. And all you got to do is the way the brother does here with Black United Fund. You can tell your bank, Kermit Eden, said, look here, I want you every month to send $4 or $3 to this underwriting company, underwriting corporation. You got 14 million black people in the workforce. Even if you could get 3 or 4 million of those people for a period of 10 months or a year, for 3 years, to send $4 or $5, 10 months a year, $10 a month, you would have $3 or $4 billion at your big head, by which you could finance and underwrite credit and loan and transform your economic arena. You got it right here within your grasp. And if you added on the millions of black retirees and others who can also contribute to this, it would not be long before you change over. We've done it. We have the African way. Bishop Edwards, with a congregation where 95% of the people were on food stamps, told them that they didn't have to live the way they did. Only in Meridian, Mississippi, only if they would do what? Change the way they thought. They combined their food stamps and they bought from a wholesaler. They created a store right in the church itself. Within 4 months, they were able to buy a supermarket. And soon thereafter, they were able to buy a 4,000-acre farm, to buy cattle, to buy office buildings, to buy computer facilities, to build dorms for their children, to create jobs for their people. All because they took food stamps and look at them not as tokens of poverty, but as wealth. That if they were pooled in the correct way, could be used to finance themselves out of poverty. He founded a second church, and none of the members are unemployed because the church has generated the employment for them. It has to do with the way you think. What did I say? The wealth of a nation is not in his pocket, but where? It's in his mind and in his head. You think you need Pathmark and you need lists to build a shopping center down here? Read Leon Sullivan's 1036 plan, where he pledged, it got 4,000 or 5,000 black people and 400 black churches to pledge that they would contribute $10 a month for 36 months. And he took that money and built the largest black-owned shopping center in the country. Why do you need Pathmark? Why do you need the other? Because some joker has given you a false economic ideology. I'm telling you. Free Street Baptist Church built 2 shopping centers and has the largest credit union of many churches in this country. It was able to do that out of its own funds. The black community, when it had African consciousness in the 1800s, before the NAACP and these assimilationist jokers got control of black consciousness, were able to build 25 and 30 independent black cities. They tried to get a whole state, the state of Oklahoma, to themselves as a people. They built the cities of Tulsa, a great black metropolis, but Tulsa was only one of many. Durham, the other black Wall Street of America. Atlanta, Sweet Albany Street. Kansas City, Chicago. The blacks were building for themselves as long as they maintained an Africa consciousness. But somehow we permitted some jokers to come in, called the advancement of colored people, and Urban League, and some other jokers who loved their white masters more than they loved themselves, and twisted the consciousness of black people and diverted black people from economic development and brought us to the path that we are in today. We have it in us. We have the examples. Blacks have the longest history of entrepreneurship of any non-white group on this continent. We have a glorious history, but we are not familiar with it. The thing that's interesting about it is that it occurred. Blacks in LA protesting, the time when that Korean woman shot that black girl in the back of her head on video and was given probation. They marched around there for a while protesting, and just like these Negroes did over here in Brooklyn and carrying on. And man said, hey, that's why somebody got here. Why are we marching like this? Why don't we create what? Our own. Now some people say, well, now you got to get a business plan, and you got to go down to the white folks bank, and you got to go do this, or you got to go to the Small Business Administration, or you got to go, you know, to the loan fund in the community. They got 10,000 strings attached to it, and it give you just enough money to fail. But they didn't do that. You know what they did? Something very simple. They went directly to the community and raised $500,000. Yes, just by asking for people to contribute to the building of a convenience store for themselves, owned by themselves. And now they're going to take the profit from that store and build 5 other centers based on this way. And take the profit and contribute to community institutions, education, and other kinds of things. Very simple. But you see, your ideology can get you screwed up so badly until you can't think of what? The simplest thing to do. The most obvious thing to do. But they were able to do it. We can do it, ladies and gentlemen. You want to compete with Pathmark? You want to sell food as low as White Mark or lower than Pathmark? Create a big cooperative food market. You can do it. Any number of black churches with their members, signing on their members, can build a giant cooperative right in this city where you can sell to your members for almost near wholesale prices. You can compete with Sam's Club, anybody else's price club anytime you want. Think of the idea that you would create across America hundreds of black cooperatives. And think of having one major buyer over those cooperatives. Think of the kind of economic power you can wield with the agribusinesses and with all the other people when you got millions of dollars in your hands. And think of what you can do with it if you do it. But you got to do what? Change your way of thinking. Change the values. Change the way you see yourself. Change the way you relate to each other. And once you do these kind of things, once you change your consciousness, then you will triumph and you will be self-determining and you will be African again. Thank you kindly.
Okay, family, I just want to make a couple of announcements before you guys leave. Our next lecture is going to be November 21st this month, and it's going to be Professor Edward Scobie, and his topic will be reparations. I'd like to also thank Brother Amos Wilson for coming out this evening and for sharing with us. You know, it seems a crime that he has to get off the stage. You know, I could listen to this brother forever. You know, and we need to get behind this brother. I understand he has some business ideas too. You need to talk to him about it if you want to get involved with him. Also, that concept that he talked about with the food co-op, we were thinking about doing that with our lecture series here. So for those of you who are interested and really want to get busy, or maybe you know something about the food business, please come up and see me. Also, please tell your friends about our lecture series. We meet here the first and third Monday of every month. We have Amos Wilson's tape on sale from his other lectures that he did here for us. The dynamic tapes also, they're on the sale in the back. I think we only got 4 left, but if you want one, then come out in the back and get it. And we also need a black supermarket right in the heart of the black community. We need good brothers and sisters to sit down and talk about it, and let's organize, because that's how we're going to make the black community rise, is to agitate, educate, and organize. Don't leave here tonight without the thought of all joining on to some organization, some group, and getting busy, or maybe just getting busy here, or with Dr. Jeffries, or with the brother Amos right here. Thank you for coming out, and hotel.